my god. What the hell did I just watch? YouTube, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions, and welcome to this special, even though all the episodes are special, so it's not that special, episode of Ishiro Honda-thon. And today we're going to be talking about the wonderful, the magnificent, the all-time greatest film ever made. That's right, everybody. King Kong Escapes. And I have to say that I've seen this movie a few times. I want to explain my backstory with this movie. I watched King Kong vs. Godzilla was the second Godzilla movie I ever watched, and when I was a kid I found it boring, and even now I find it boring. And my father, when it was on TV, told me that there was another King Kong movie made kind of like this, that had a robot Kong in it, and it was awesome, and that he used to watch it on TV a lot when he was growing up, when he had that black and white TV. Okay, so then as time went on, this kind of image of this robot Kong started building in my head, and blah 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 blah. And then lo and behold, on Amazon.com, there was a release of a DVD for a movie called King Kong Escapes, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And this is the time when I was really starting to learn exactly who Ishiro Honda was, who Eiji Tsuburaya was, who Tomoyuki Tanaka was. In fact, it was doing research on them that I found this movie, and it just happened to be released at the same time as the DVD was corresponding. So I looked at it, and I was like, oh my god, I gotta have this movie! And so my parents were kind enough to buy it for me, and I was like, oh! I was like a little kid during Christmas. My hands were shaking, right? And I'm putting it in the DVD player, and I'm sit back, got my giant-ass bowl of popcorn, and lo and behold, King Kong Escape starts playing. And let me tell you what, this movie was a big letdown. This movie is a piece of shit. Don't get me wrong. I've said many times in other videos when I was a part of the Sons of Serizawa, I stated several times there, I stated on several videos of the tokusatsu nature that I don't like this movie, and that I find this movie boring, and nothing really good comes from it. Well, I can tell you that this last viewing I had, I actually really enjoyed it a lot more than I remember. Maybe it's just because I've kind of dumbed myself down. Maybe this is my form of retardation that's coming out. I don't know. But whatever reason, I found myself really enjoying this film because of how dumb it is. In fact, I can only really compare it to Latitude Zero. Latitude Zero was so 60s and so bad, it was good. This movie was so bad, it wasn't really good, but it's just so bad that you just have a fun time watching it. This film was, of course, made by Toho. It was a joint production, mainly Rankin Bass. Rankin Bass, who gave us all those, Rudolph and Santa Claus is Coming to Town, those kind of claymation movies. That is what Rankin Bass is mainly known for. That and The Last Dinosaur. Ugh. And then, this comes along and they release it. So they pretty much financed this movie. Toho just helped distribute it. And this was an attempt for Toho to make a King Kong film franchise as well as a Godzilla film franchise. This was them trying to do something new and get another franchise out there other than Godzilla. Because, this is the time where television was really starting to take over, so they wanted something new, they wanted something fresh, they wanted something theatrical but yet meant for kids. They wanted something, I hate to say it, but they wanted something kind of like the Gamera series, because the Gameras were definitely geared for children, since children were in each fucking movie, so they wanted something really dumb and really stupid, and this is it. This movie did not do anywhere near as well as what, the producers were expecting. This movie actually did pretty bad at the box office. It wasn't until the film was released on television that it suddenly got the cult following that, quite frankly, I think the film deserves. And it actually, just to show you, it did so bad its opening weekend that then they decided to do it as a double bill with a film by Don Knotts. And if you want to stoop to the lowest level of Don Knotts, you know that you have no faith in your movie whatsoever. Toho, in all seriousness, wanted to make a King Kong movie really bad. They've wanted to make a King Kong movie since the year 1960, and this film was made in 1967. And so it's time for a little history. So what happened was that Toho at some point wanted to get the rights to Frankenstein, and they got the rights to Frankenstein. And they wanted to make a movie called King Kong versus Frankenstein, which was an idea proposed by Willis O'Brien, who was the creator of the original King Kong, or the special effects animator of King Kong, the soul of King Kong, if you will. That movie fell under. That movie couldn't have been made, so then they wanted to do a Frankenstein versus Godzilla. That kind of fell through because then something happened with the rights to Frankenstein, and so then Toho actually got the rights to King Kong, so they made King Kong versus Godzilla. Basically, it being the Frankenstein versus Godzilla script just replaced Frankenstein with Kong. That explains why Kong gets his power by electricity, which is completely dropped in King Kong Escapes, by the way. Anyways, so then they're like, well, fuck, what are we gonna do? And so there's this huge debacle with the King Kong rights. They lost it for a little while, and then they regained it. And that's why we also had the Frankenstein Conquers the World movie and War of the Gargantuas made before this. Now, they still have this rights to kind of King Kong. And what happened is they were like, whoa, we gotta do this. And Rankin Bass came forward and they were like, we have a really successful TV show going on called The King Kong Show, which was an animated TV show that was like a Saturday morning cartoon, blah, 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 blah. They said, I wanna make this. They approached Toho and said, I wanna make this TV show into a theatrical movie meant for kids. And Toho was like, okay. And so Rankin Bass put forward the money. Toho hired a crew. They hired Jun Fukuda. They hired a writer. I think it was Shinichi Sekizawa. Well, bam! They had a script called King Kong versus Ebirah. And that movie, Rankin Bass hated because it didn't follow the cartoon whatsoever. And so they couldn't make that, but oh my god, they already have a director hired. But Toho was like, oh my god, we already have a director hired, we have a cast and crew made, we have a script already, so what the fuck are we gonna do? Well, let's replace King Kong with Godzilla. So then we got Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. A year later, in 1967, Toho tried to do it again, and Rankin Bass was like, all right. And so a script was written by Takashi Kimura, and Ishiro Honda was hired because a bunch of Western actors were being brought in, and Rankin Bass read the script, and Rankin Bass was like, this script is still a piece of shit, but we've invested money into this, so we're not going to do the same thing twice. So they said, just go ahead, and they greenlit what became King Kong Escapes. No one really wanted to make this movie. Everyone involved with this picture, with maybe the exception of Eiji Tsuburaya, really wanted to make this movie. I mean, Ishiro Honda was being, at this time, Ishiro Honda was really questioning his career because of this he hated the end of his career in 1964, he hated what he did in 1965, he hated making Frankenstein Conquers the World, and he hated making Invasion of the Astro Monster, mainly because of Eiji Tsuburaya, I hate to say. And then he made War of the Gargantuas, which War of the Gargantuas was, though an excellent, excellent motion picture, it isn't really for the reason of Ishiro Honda. And so he really wanted to stop. He wanted to leave Toho. Though he was like, but I owe Toho my career and everything like that. So he was very much torn at this time. Because not only that, but his best friend, his best bud, Akira Kurosawa, was like, dude, you gotta leave fucking Toho and you got to make your own stuff. Come work for me. And Ishiro Honda's like, I can't because I owe them my career. Blah, 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 blah. There's this huge debacle. Well, at this time, Tomoyuki Tanaka came up to him and said, well, there's a bunch of Western actors that are going to be in this film. You, Ishiro Honda, you've worked with Western actors before, especially in 1965 and 1966, so you're going to be hired to direct this. And Ishiro Honda was like, sigh, okay. And blah, 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 blah. Lo and behold, Ishiro Honda signed the contract, and bam, look at that. He was to direct King Kong Escapes. I hate to say this, but this movie really should have been directed by Jun Fukuda. Jun Fukuda would have made the characters at least more entertaining, the action scenes would have been better brought together, and I believe the writing would have been better, but we'll get into the writing a little bit later. But we got Honda instead. which isn't a bad thing, don't get me wrong, it's just, he's the wrong director. It has the same problem as Latitude Zero. Latitude Zero should have been directed by Jun Fukuda. It would have been probably a lot more fast-paced and a lot, quite frankly, more fun. This movie kind of suffers the same fate. Now, with Rankin Bass really helming this project completely and financing a majority of it. I noticed watching this film, and this isn't just the print, this is the film in general. This film is much more colorful and much better quality than a lot of the Toho Scope films made from this point previous. If you watch a lot of Toho Scope movies made previously, you'll notice that there's a lot of kind of like grain and the colors are kind of faded. Not just because of the quality of the film and how it's degraded, but it's just how their color went. That's how the color worked. And I discovered why here. If you read the credits and stuff, this film was actually shot in Panavision, not Toho Scope. This was shot in an American lens with American film stock. And because of that, this film was also shot in Technicolor, not the coloring process that I want to say it was almost Eastman color, that, you know, Toho other films were kind of made for. So, you know, that's kind of a cool thing, you know. It looks more, and because of that, it looks more colorful, and the film hasn't degraded as much, and, you know, it just looks, the film does look gorgeous, I'm not going to lie. This is a very colorful Toho film that makes me love, this kind of genres. I especially love the colors, and I love how everything's shot, yeah, blah, 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 blah. Now, this film was written by Takashi Kimura, which, if you want to know my whole spiel about Takashi Kimura, go watch, it was 2 episodes ago when this is uploaded, go watch the Matango review, where we get into Takashi Kimura there. Long story short, he was a very sad individual, a very pessimistic man, and wrote darker scripts than Shinichi Sekizawa, who wrote very uplifting scripts and very colorful scripts. And so Takashi Kimura gets assigned this movie. I don't know why Ishiro Honda went with him. I really don't. Because this film was supposed to be very lighthearted. This film was supposed to be meant for children. This movie was supposed to be colorful. This movie is still lighthearted, and this movie is still, you know, very colorful. But Takashi Kimura does not fit that mode. It doesn't. I believe if Sekizawa wrote this script, it would have been a lot lighter, it would have been a lot more fun, and it would have been executed better, or the writing would have been a little bit more motif to this sort of film. Would have fit the film more, would have fit the tonality of the film that Rankin Bass wanted more if Shinichi Sekizawa was given the chance to rewrite or to write this. So I believe Takashi Kimura was not the right man to write this as well. As a result, this film is very, very, very slow. It is. It has its very slow points. I mean, you got the first act, which is like, okay, yeah, you got a blah, 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 blah. It's kind of fun. And then you got the third act, which is insane. And then you have the middle, which is just so slow. I mean, so slow. In fact, in the Japanese cut of the film, it's even worse. I mean, the Japanese cut of the film is 104 minutes. That's really long for a tokusatsu film at this time. And then the American version is 1 hour and 36 minutes. It's 96 minutes, which is still long for a tokusatsu movie made at this time. This is 10 minutes longer than what a normal tokusatsu film normally was. All those cuts were really made in that middle section. And it's basically, they were made in the middle section where the villain captures the protagonist and they try to control Kong. That's where the slow part is, and that's where the Americans cut a lot of the kind of slower stuff out. And even then, it's still slow. So, yeah, the American cut, I believe, is a little bit better paced, and I just think is overall better. There, I said it. This plot is just full of coincidences. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be that way or not. You know, but what the main plot revolves around this thing called Element X, and everybody wants Element X, and there's this evil doctor named Doctor Who is fucking awesome, but we'll get into him later, and Madam X, who really want the element. What is it? What does it do? Is it a weapon? Is it an energy source? What the hell is it? It's never explained. Another thing that really happens that I have to ask is why the hell does Doctor Who, the main villain, build a robotic Kong in the first place? If you want to dig this stuff, because what happens is they're up in the North Pole, right? And they're digging all this shit, and they're building all this stuff to dig that Element X out. There's tons and tons and tons of it. Why in God's earth would you build a robotic Kong to dig it out, when you could put all that energy into something to dig it out? Why don't you build something like the Katango, which is more economically friendly and more feasible than a fucking robotic version of Kong? Apparently in the cartoon, Kong is built as nothing, Mecha-Kong was built as nothing but a weapon. And in here, he's just built to dig. So why the fuck would you build an ape? You know, and on top of that, there is a huge tunnel leading to Element X, because when they capture Kong and get the real Kong to start digging it because the robot Kong, shocker, fails, there's a tunnel leading right to it. So why don't they just get something to dig it out with regular machines or with And also, what a coincidence that Mecha-Kong was built to be the exact size of the real King Kong, because nobody in this movie, because this movie doesn't take place in the Toho continuity apparently, nobody knew what the real Kong's height would be. And so, lo and behold, he just happens to be the same size as the real King Kong. Another thing is, like, why would Doctor Who waste time getting the real Kong, a wild animal, to dig out Element X instead of again building this machine? Why would you get an animal that would probably die of whatever the hell is in there because it fucks with machines? And clearly, you do say that it's poisonous. You don't say it's radiation, but you say it's poisonous. So why the fuck would you get Kong to go in there and dig it out? Why would you get something that would die in the first place to go dig it out? That makes no goddamn sense. And another coincidence is that all the protagonists of this film, you have Carl Nelson, Captain Nomura, Miss Watson. Susan Watson. And so she's like, they're all on this submarine that are going to do some sort of scientific expedition for the UN, because, you know, the UN is now a main force in the world, blah, 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 blah. And their ship just, they happen to be talking about King Kong in the scene previous, and lo and behold, they just happen to have engine trouble because of a rock slide in the middle of the ocean by Mondo Island, which is where Kong just happens to be. They arrive on the island in this really stupid and impractical little hovercraft, and so they tell Susan, I laughed, I'm bringing this up only because it made me laugh, they tell Susan, Carl Nelson and Nomura to be like, oh hey, stay there, this is man's work, and so they go up into the jungle, leaving Susan all alone. Oh my god, look, a T-Rex like Gorosaurus thing, he just happens to come, but this is Gorosaurus' debut film, by the way. Gorosaurus just comes out, she screams, and lo and behold, Kong wakes up, and she just happens to be on the shore where she happens to be, and Gorosaurus just happened to be strolling by where Susan just happened to be. You get my point here, there is a lot of coincidences here. Another one being that when Kong escapes from Doctor Who's grasp in the North Pole, he just happens to swim and just happens to land in Tokyo, which makes no goddamn sense because geographically Hokkaido is the city closest to the North Pole. Why would Kong waste his time even stopping in Japan in the first place? Granted, this movie was not supposed to be smart. This movie was supposed to be really fucking stupid and kid-friendly. And this is why, that is exactly the reason why Sekizawa should have written it. It would have been funner, it would have been probably more campier, it just would have been, in my opinion, a more fun movie. Not that this movie isn't fun, it really is. I know that all these things of me complaining makes it sound like that I absolutely detest this movie. I don't. There are some things that I do absolutely fucking enjoy about this film. As I said about the protagonist, I guess I'll get into the protagonist now. None of them are really that interesting or in-depth, nor were they really supposed to be, I guess. They were supposed to be the good guys for the sake of being the good guys, while the bad guy was supposed to be the bad guy for the sake of being the bad guy. So you have Nelson and Nomura, who are kind of buddy-buddy. Nomura is played by Akira Takarada. Nelson is played by Rogue Reeson, who is the brother of Rex Reeson, who played on This Island Earth. So I wondered why they sounded familiar, and lo and behold, they were brothers. Ruth, they're gonna have a deep voice. It sounds kind of like this. Yeah. The only thing that I have to say about Nelson is that Nelson is a very suave kind of man. He's not as suave as Robert Horton in The Green Slime, but he's still pretty damn suave. There's nothing really overly interesting about them other than that they do the right thing at the right time. They are kind of there to just be the good guys in it. There's no real character to them. They're very two-dimensional. And the same goes with Watson. Susan is the stereotypical sexy female scientist that were in all these kind of 50s and 60s science fiction movies, especially in the United States. And she was played by Linda Miller. And Linda Miller was a model who was born in the United States, I believe, and she came over to Japan to do some model work because there was an opportunity for her here, or opportunity for her there, and may I just say that it's very obvious that she is, because apparently her acting was so bad, she had to be dubbed over here in the United States. So she was speaking English already, right? She was speaking English as it was. But she did so bad that Rankin was like, oh my god. And they had to dub her over again. Holy shit. Because Road Reason as Nelson, he wasn't dubbed over, that's his real voice. In fact, Road Reason, the only reason why he agreed to do this movie was because, it wasn't because he was really desperate, he had a very successful TV career going on. He was in several TV shows, mainly soap operas. But when he came over to Japan, he was like, I only want a vacation in Japan, why not make a fun movie while we're at it? That's a pretty decent attitude, where he was just like, yeah, this movie's gonna be shit, but I'm gonna have fun. That's a pretty decent attitude, and I can tell that he is kind of having fun. His character is no good, but, you know, I can at least tell that the actor, he was trying to have fun, and I can tell that Akira Takarada was having fun in this stupid film. You know, his character is no good, but there are scenes where, you know, there's action going on, where he's climbing, at the end of the movie, where he's climbing Tokyo Tower, or the scenes where he's, you know, holding the gun or helping civilians out. I can tell that he was at least having fun. Linda Miller, I can't tell anything, because she's just about as, she about has the emotions of a cardboard box. And she's a whiny bitch. Now that doesn't help because her dubber has a terrible voice. And Linda Miller, in recent interviews, because she has finally embraced the fact that she's been in this movie, and I don't really blame her for kind of ignoring it, but again, she was more of a model than an actress anyways, but in recent conventions, she's talked about King Kong Escapes, and she said, yeah, it was terrible, but you know, I look at it now and I'm like, you know, it has impacted so many people, and so many people have had fun with it, something good came out of this movie. And she's very much so correct in that. However, where this movie sticks out to me is the villains. And when I say the villains are fucking amazing, I mean they are fucking amazing. So you have, let's start with Madam X. Madam X is played by the girl who played the Venetian in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. She's from a shady country, and, you know, I'm pretty sure that this country is out to conquer the world with Element X, even though we don't know what the fuck that shit is. And, you know, she basically, her and her country turned to Doctor Who out of desperation. And Doctor Who was rejected by the UN Science Committee for being basically too ambitious, which I don't think anybody can ever be really too ambitious, but whatever. And so he was kicked out, he was a reject, so here's a rejected country going to rejected man to make a rejected idea to get Element X. Yeah, this should turn out just fine. She's the only character that you can kind of analyze and be like, you know, she actually has some 3 dimensions to her. Because at the beginning she's very cold, she clearly... What's interesting about her is that she's clearly doing something unethical but doesn't want to. It's very clear from the get-go that that's what she kind of is. So as the film goes along, her trust in her country and her trust in Doctor Who diminishes significantly to the point where she actually starts helping the captured protagonists escape. She's a horny bitch, I'll tell you that, because she tries to seduce everyone in this movie. At the beginning she tries to seduce Doctor Who, and then in the middle of the movie she tries to seduce Nelson, because Nelson is supposed to be the hot, sexy American leading actor. Road Reason looks like he's about 20 years older than her. You know, she is an attempt at a character. For example, there's a scene where she helps them escape, right? So she completely turns on Doctor Who, right? She completely turns on Doctor Who. And Doctor Who just has had enough of her and just locks her away basically until her absolute demise. Which her demise is absolutely goddamn hilarious because it's so over the top. So she tries to sabotage everything with Mecha-Kong because King Kong escaped. Well, here's what happened. Because King Kong escapes the North Pole and arrives in Japan, Doctor Who is like, we gotta follow him. And so they follow him in the ship and they get Mecha-Kong into this giant aircraft carrier that Doctor Who builds and goes to Japan. And they release Mecha-Kong after King Kong. Speaking of which, there's a scene when King Kong escapes where freaking Kong is running and Mecha-Kong is giving chase. They never fight or anything, but Kong jumps into the icy cold water and swims away, and Mecha-Kong stops. Because I guessed that he couldn't get in the water. It's never explained, but I guessed that he couldn't get in the water because guess what? He's a machine. And machines don't exactly work well in water. When this ship is pulling into fucking Tokyo Bay, how the fuck does Mecha-Kong manage to go from this aircraft carrier to actual Tokyo. How does that happen? How does that work? That's a plot hole. So they arrive in Tokyo Bay, and once again, Madam X helps Nelson, Nomura, and Watson escape, and they nearly escape. And so, as Mecha-Kong is about to fight Kong in the middle of Tokyo, because that's what has to happen in a kaiju movie, she tries to sabotage everything, and she puts up a fight. None of the henchmen seem to do shit to this weak, scrawny woman. And then Doctor Who says, "Get back!" And so they all run away. He pulls out a gun and shoots her. Now this is hilarious because of how she dies. She gets shot once, she goes, "Ah!" And she gets shot again, she goes, "Ah! It's beautifully hilarious. That being said, you want to know why this movie is really worth fucking watching? It's because of Doctor Who. I made my Doctor Who joke. But anyways, this Doctor Who, HU, is fucking amazing. He's played by Eisei Yamamoto. Which, if you want to hear my complicated backstory to the fake backstory that a couple of friends and I from Geeks for Geeks, you should join that group, plug, kind of made for his backstory. It's fucking hilarious because of all the movies that he's played in. But he is so glorious in this film. Doctor Who is the reason why you should watch this movie. You know how like a lot of bad B's 50s and 60s science fiction movies that are really cheap usually have that one performance that's really fucking good because it's so over the top, kind of like Jeremy Irons in Dungeons and Dragons. Doctor Who is that in this film, and you can tell that every scene this actor is in, every scene his character is on screen, he eats everything up, and it is so goddamn beautiful. And for that reason, I will say that Doctor Who is the best villain ever. Oh my god. And not even that in his performance and how he has eyebrows and he's like lifting up his eyebrows and the way how he talks with an over and exaggerated motion of his mouth. And his bad teeth, he has bad teeth, and his eyebrows, and the way how his hair is slicked back, and the way how it's combed, and how it's both gray and black. It's majestic. And his costume only adds to him. He's always wearing pure black. He's got a fucking cape. A fucking cape, alright? That is awesome. He looks nothing like the Doctor Who in the cartoon. If you look at the Doctor Who in the cartoon, he's like the short, scrawny guy, really pale skin and stuff like that. No, this guy is fucking awesome. This Doctor Who is where Doctor Who should be at. In fact, I like this Doctor Who more than I like Doctor Who, the actual Doctor Who. On top of that, and this is the main reason why the American version is so much better, is because he is dubbed, Eizo Yamamoto is dubbed by none other than Paul Frees, the man of 1,000 voices. And if you don't know who Paul Frees is, go look him up, and you will recognize his voice from a lot of things, especially Rankin. If you're too lazy to go look him up, Paul Frees does the voice of Burgermeister Meisterburger in Santa Claus is Coming to Town. To me, that's his most famous role. And so you have the voice of Burgermeister Meisterburger coming out of Doctor Who's mouth, and it's amazing. And this is no offense to Eizo Yamamoto, or Eisei Yamamoto, but when I'm watching the Japanese version, I was like, something's missing from this performance, and that's because Paul Frees isn't doing the voice. And I'm like, to me, you don't have this Doctor Who without the voice of Paul Frees. Paul Frees is what really makes it kind of gel and come together so amazing. You know, just the way how, after Madam X tries to seduce Nelson, there's a scene where he like slams open the door, right? He just slams open the door, and you just see him like fly down these steps, and the cape is just dragging in the background, and it's glorious. It's amazing. And like there's a scene where they capture Kong, and they drop all the chloroform on it, and they knock Kong out, and then they lift him up with helicopters to bring him on there. There's this native on the island who happens to be the only native on the island. He's like, the native is like, even though we don't understand him, he's clearly like, don't you dare take Kong away. Kong is amazing. Kong is God. And Doctor Who just lifts an eyebrow and says, yes, Kong's mine now. And he pulls out a gun and shoots him 4 times. Amazing. This is why I love Doctor Who. Doctor Who is just awesome. I can't do him any justice. I seriously can't. You have to see this performance to fucking believe it. It's like Jeremy Irons from Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like Tommy Wiseau from fucking The Room. You have to see those performances to believe it. You have to see the glory of Doctor Who in King Kong Escapes to just understand why this movie is so entertaining. Ugh, he's a typical villain. He's just so over the top and everything he's just evil for the sake of being evil. He is kind of given a small backstory where he's like, he was rejected from the UN, and there's a great line where he's drinking wine with Madame X, and she's like, you know that the UN's gonna search for you. And he's like, you think I'm gonna get outsmarted by the UN? And she's like, maybe, you better be careful. And she's like, well, don't worry about it. I can outsmart the UN any day and any time. And I'm just like, yes. Yes. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Watch this movie for him. Seriously. Okay, so let's actually talk about the main character of this movie. Let's talk about Kong. Poor Willis O'Brien. I don't know if he was dead yet or not, but poor Willis O'Brien. At least Haru Nakajima plays Kong in this movie. And it kind of shows, because Haru Nakajima put probably the best performances of any suit actor of any kaiju film, period. But Haru Nakajima at least tried to do something with this bulky-ass, terrible suit. You know, like, there's several scenes where Kong tilts his head or scratches his nose, blinks quite a bit, you know, is looking around. Like, whenever he hears Watson scream, Watson is Kong's Fay Ray in this film. You have, you know, he looks around, he clearly recognizes her. Stuff like that does, you know, give Kong a bit of a personality and gives him light. You know, this isn't, you know, again, this is kind of something that sets this movie above some other science fiction movies at this time. Or like a film like Konga, for example. Konga has the suit's just about as good as Konga, but, meaning not very good. But, you know, Konga had no character. Kong, at least here, has no personality. Here, at least Kong has personality. At least, you know, you can watch this and be like, oh, I know kind of what he's thinking. But the problem is that Haru Nakajima is hidden underneath this terrible, and I mean terrible, terrible, terrible suit. Oh my god! You know, and you know, he's hidden under the face, you know, at least looks a bit better than 62 Kong. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the thing that bugs me the most about this suit, believe it or not, isn't that it looks like shit. It's the eyes. The eyes just completely destroy the suit because they're so derpy. You just look at these eyes, and you're like, there's this one shot where it's like they put how Doctor Who controls Kong for him to dig himself out and dig out Element X is that they have mind control. They put him in mind control. It's hilarious. But there's a shot where suddenly it cuts. It fades to a shot of Kong kind of sedated, and I bursted out laughing because of how derpy Kong looks. Like, you don't even have to Photoshop his eyes going into different directions. Like, it's that bad. And what bugs me a lot about that is that, you know, Eiji Tsuburaya has done apes before, or done mammals before, and done them not the best, but decently. You know, what happens is, I think this suit would have been a lot better if they actually used Haru Nakajima's real eyes instead of these plastic shits that they put on. You know, it's been done before. It was done in Ishiro Honda's Half Human, where they used the actual actor's eyes, which gave the snow creature, a lot of personality and a lot of character simply because of that. But even the year previous, in War of the Gargantuas, they were able to, you know, give the creature a lot of expression because it was makeup on the face and the eyes and shit. Because of that, it became a phenomenal movie, and the kaijus have more character than the actual characters do. So why didn't they do something like that here? I just don't quite get it. I've always said that suitmation mainly works for portraying lizards, not mammals, because mammals have so many expressions in their face. Because even in War of the Gargantuas and even in Half Human, the faces are still very stiff. Not as stiff as like Godzilla per se, but they're still pretty damn stiff. And this suit is the face is very fucking stiff. And it just astonishes me why Eiji Tsuburaya didn't do something similar here, when they just did something very similar to it the previous year. I don't fucking get it. Here, it basically looks like Kong has got a bad Botox injection. Like, you can't move his face at all. There's no expression in Kong's face whatsoever, and that is the number one thing that bugs me about this movie. or bugs me about this suit is just how terrible the face is. And on top of that, for some reason, Toho didn't want to get the 67 Kong suit wet. I never got their opinion on that. I never got it. They did that with several Godzilla suits. That's why you'll see Godzilla suits change in the later Godzilla movies after this. But, or even the Godzilla film made this year, Son of Godzilla. But they didn't want to get the 67 Kong suit wet. So what they did was they dug in the vaults of his suits and brought out the 62 Kong suit, which wasn't built for Haruo Nakajima, by the way. And so they just took off the Kong head from that one, thank God, because that Kong head looks even worse than the one in this film. And they just took off the head from the 67 suit and plopped it onto the 62 suit. And they're like, there, that looks good enough, right? I want to know who the hell honestly walked on set and be like, yeah, that looks like a gorilla. Because it doesn't. It looks so goddamn bad. Because not only was that suit built for somebody other than Haruo Nakajima, but that suit is also smaller than the 67 one. So you have this gigantic fucking head on top of this tiny ass body. And it is so terrible to look at. It's like the head is about half the size of the body. It looks so bad. I mean it. It looks so bad, and you can actually see the head bobbing around on it, and you can see it lifting up in shots. There are also scenes on the 67 suit where you can clearly see the zipper on the back of Kong. I'm like, oh my god, you couldn't even cover that up with fur? At least they managed to do that in the 62 suit. And on top of that, the fur makes it look like Kong has fucking mange. I mean, yeah, he'd be bitten up by a lot of bugs on this island, but he wouldn't look like he has mange. And gorillas are relatively clean. They groom themselves a lot. So why does King Kong look like he has mange? This suit, in the end, is fucking terrible. Terrible. Like, during the fight with Gorosaurus at the beginning of the movie, on a side note, that was a nice little nod. That was kind of a fulfillment of one of Eiji Tsuburai's dream, was to recreate the T-Rex fight from the original King Kong. He kind of fulfilled that here in terms of also breaking the Gorosaurus' jaw and so on and so forth. And that fight is relatively entertaining. So you have that, right? And during that scene, there's a scene where you can clearly see the entire head completely lift up, revealing the metal part of the zipper and revealing some of Haruo Nakajima's skin. And I'm like, oh, you couldn't have done another take. On another note, we have Mechani-Kong. Mechani-Kong is awesome if they used him more. Would have been awesome if they used him more. I mean, don't get me wrong, anything that's a robot, giant fucking robot is awesome anyways, but even Jet Jaguar, but especially Jet Jaguar. But you know, the thing with Kong, or Mecha-Kong, is that the only real weapon that he has, other than that he's a robot, are these bombs or grenade-like things that he has on his belt. That's really it. You know, he's not really overpowered. This isn't like Mechagodzilla that has missiles coming out of everything. And you know, it does make him kind of an adversary that King Kong could fight basically on equal terms. In fact, there is, you know, a great line, but we'll get into that a little later, that kind of explains that. But the problem with Mecha-Kong is that he's dormant through most of the movie. He's only functional in 3 scenes. 3 scenes of the movie. He's functional when he fails. He's functional when he chases Kong, which he's only on screen for, I'm not kidding you, 15 seconds. And then he's in the end fight scene, which isn't all that spectacular. And that's the problem with him. I was like, can't you do more with him? At least with Mechagodzilla. Mechagodzilla in the first movie is in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Mechagodzilla's not in it that much at all. He's only on screen for like a total, I think, of like 8 minutes. He's not on screen a lot, but you remember him because of all the fucking shit that he does. Mecha-Kong does nothing. The ending fight scene, it's nice, don't get me wrong. Anything with two monster suits duking it out in the middle of miniature Tokyo will get an A in my book any day because it's always entertaining. And this fight is entertaining, and there's a great line where one of Doctor Who's agents goes during the fight, and they do kind of play it up. Just like in, what's great about King Kong vs. Godzilla is that they do play up that Godzilla is like a giant walking tank. He's slow, but he can do a shit ton of damage, while Kong is very fast and very flexible and can move a lot quicker. And they play that fight, especially during the end fight scene, they play that to the film's advantage. Here they do something similar, but to a much lesser extent. There's a great line where one of Doctor Who's henchmen goes, "The real Kong seems faster," and Doctor Who laughs and says a great line. He says, "But my Kong won't tire." I love that line. I do, because, and I wish they did something to play on that, even making the fight longer, making it bigger, or doing something with it. Because they don't do anything to play on that. And I was like, oh, you wasted such a good opportunity where Kong is like he's getting tuckered out, he's breathing heavily or something, and while Mecha-Kong is still duking it out and still going after him. That would have been a great thing to kind of play on, but it was a wasted opportunity, unfortunately. The fight on the ground is fine. I kind of like it, the punches and everything, the nice reference to the original King Kong again. I like the punches, I like how everything moves, I like how the camera's moving a lot, you know, making it look like they're moving a lot more than they really are. That's fine, but once they climb on Tokyo Tower, it's boring to me. They don't really do anything. It's just kind of like, bam, bam, bam. And it's too stiff for my liking, in my opinion, kind of boring. So at least the fight on the ground is entertaining. Speaking of which, when Kong arrives in Tokyo, he's kind of freaking out, he's destroying shit, and Susan comes and saves the day, right? She's like, Kong! And Kong is like, Rrr! And he picks her up, everything's all nice. And so when Mecha-Kong shows up, he sets her down, and Mecha-Kong swoops down and picks her up and brings her to the top of Tokyo Tower. But whatever, you know, so he puts, she is dropped, and she just happens to fall into place on a railing right on the edge that happens to have a guardrail, so she's kind of safe there, right? Why in the name of hell, while these two monsters are duking it out above you, why the hell would she try to crawl down the metal railing with no ladder, where there's so much vibration that'd be going on that she would probably vibrate herself off and fall to her fucking death? Why would she put herself in danger like that? And that's another problem with the movie that I have. This movie has a lot of fake tension, and what I mean by that is, like, it's something that was clearly avoidable, but someone was just stupid, and it created this sense of tension that really didn't need to be there. And that entire scene, because that actually is focused on more than the actual goddamn fight between Kong and Mecha-Kong, and I'm like, God damn it, show me some more of, you know, show me more of the two monsters fighting. I don't care about these human stuff. I came here to see Kong and Mecha-Kong fight, and I'm finally seeing them fight, and you're focusing on Nomura going up there and saving Watson, two characters that I don't give a flying fuck about. It's a lot of fun, it really is, but there's a lot of shit you have to sit through in order to see it. Do I like the movie? I can't say it's a good movie. I will never say it's a good movie. It's a terrible movie. But it's an enjoyable film to sit down with a bunch of friends and riff on it. In fact, that's how I recommend watching this film, is if you have a bunch of friends and just rip on it. Because this movie is really bad. Do watch it for Doctor Who, though. I can't say that enough. Doctor Who is fucking awesome. I give this movie 2.5 out of 4 stars. It is really stupid, it's not very good, but it's fun to watch with a bunch of people to just riff on and have a fun time. So that being said, go on Facebook, like AN Productions, like my new movie, Which Way They Walk, which we have begun production. We've already shot 4 scenes and put them in the can, so we're doing good so far. Just continue wishing us luck there and continue supporting us there. Like the Godzilla Saga on Facebook. And if you wish, if you want to have a fun time and talk about geek things, every Monday is Creature Appreciation Day. You should see some of the shit that we talk about on this group. Join Geeks for Geeks. It's a lot of fun. Be who you were born to be. That's our slogan. And, you know, just come and have a good time. Make sure to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and stay tuned for more episodes of Ishiro Honda-thon. So, in the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying, sayonara.